welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you've ever found yourself in one of those moments where you felt completely unseen or just forgotten, maybe just absolutely crushed by the weight of it all, then you are definitely in the right place. Today, we are diving deep into some really fascinating source material. It's a devotional resource, and it presents this powerful counter-argument to that feeling of being totally alone.
That's exactly right. The core idea, what this material really explores, is this concept of a foundational care. The idea that no matter how alone you feel right now, or how heavy your past has been, you have never actually been alone.
So our mission today is to unpack that, this radical idea that before you could even carry your own weight, before you carried responsibility, you were already being carried. We need to find what that really means, and then look at these surprising real-world examples from all over the globe that the source uses to show it in action.
And the way they set this up is actually really beautiful. They frame the whole thing around this theme that healing does not rush and hope does not hurry. It's sort of an invitation to just slow down, to really think about the earliest moments of your life, a time before you even knew what fear was or disappointment. Long before conscious memory, we're looking for that anchor point.
Okay, let's unpack that core claim then, because it really does run counter to so much of how we think today. The source material grounds this whole thing in a really ancient text.
It does. It goes straight to the prophet Isaiah, chapter 46, verse 3. And the declaration there is, "Listen to me, who have been born by me from birth, carried from the womb." I mean, the language is so explicit. It establishes this divine care, not, later in life after some achievement, but right at the very beginning, from birth. It's presented as this original, non-negotiable status.
And what I find so interesting is how the source uses that verse to just completely redefine the timeline of when our value begins. It makes these really key distinctions about what this care didn't wait for.
Yeah, it's very focused on taking merit out of the equation. The material is just unequivocal that the support is not conditional. It says this care did not wait for your success.
Right.
It didn't start when your belief was finally perfect or when you made the right call.
And I think this is the point that resonates with so many of us, the pressure to always perform. It says this foundational force did not wait for you to become strong.
Well, that is the central paradox. That's what this whole deep dive really hinges on. We're so conditioned culturally to believe that we have to achieve something, competence, independence, to earn support or recognition or love.
Sure.
But the core statement here is the absolute opposite of that. Care existed in full before we could carry ourselves. It just flips the whole basis of value from something you have to achieve in the future to an immutable fact from your past.
And when you stop and think about that shift, moving value from the future to the past, it really challenges the whole engine of meritocracy, doesn't it? It suggests your worth is just, it's already there, it's not a constant pursuit. But, how does the source square that with the reality of human vulnerability? We look around the world and we see struggle everywhere.
And that's exactly where it pivots. It moves to what it calls the global reality. It reminds us that across every culture, every continent, every single human story begins the same way. Completely dependent, utterly vulnerable, and needing that foundational, sustaining care. No one arrives strong or prepared.
So dependency is the universal starting point. That really reinforces this devotional reflection, which I think is incredibly powerful for you, the listener, to really internalize.
Exactly. It asks you to do this reflection before you understood life, before you even knew what fear was or had your first disappointment. You were already known, already seen, already carried. It just frames this idea of inherent value that existed long before you could even form a memory to confirm it. It's a value that's given, not earned.
Okay, so if that's the historical context for our worth, let's get into the mechanics. What exactly does the source define this divine carrying as? Because it's clearly more than just support.
It is, and getting the full scope here is critical. The source gives this clear four-part analysis of the carrying nature, which takes it from just, simple assistance to something much deeper, an intentional, permanent relationship.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the first part?
First, it means taking responsibility. This isn't just about, helping with a load. It's about claiming ownership of the person's welfare right from the very start.
So it's a foundational covenant.
Okay.
But the second point is where it gets really real, I think. Absorbing weight. What does the source mean by that?
Absorbing weight. It implies that the carer doesn't just steady the burden, they actively take the load onto themselves. So the person being carried doesn't feel the full crushing force of it. Think of a little kid trying to lift something huge. A parent doesn't just stand there and cheer them on.
They lift it.
They lift the stone. So it suggests this transfer of burden. The idea is that the weight of inadequacy or fear of failure is absorbed by the one doing the carrying.
That distinction, absorbing the weight versus just supporting the effort, I mean, that's vital for anyone who feels perpetually overwhelmed. It's like it gives you permission to put the burden down.
And that flows right into the third definition, staying close. This is all about proximity. It implies a consistent presence, not just intermittent aid when things go wrong. The closeness itself is a source of stability.
And the fourth one, that must be about the permanence of it all.
Exactly. It means never letting go. This speaks to a commitment that goes beyond time or circumstance or even the mistakes of the person being carried. It's a guarantee that the foundational relationship is permanent.
So if you put those four together, taking responsibility, absorbing weight, staying close and never letting go, that's what leads the source to what it calls its core truth.
Absolutely. The core truth that derives from that is this triple affirmation. You are not an accident. You are not forgotten. You have been carried since the beginning. It just establishes this inherent worth that is totally independent of what's happening now or what happened in the past. It's an attempt to recalibrate how you see yourself.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, if that initial relationship is one of established, non-negotiable care, then everything that comes later, conflict, scarcity, trauma, it doesn't cancel out that original status. And this is where the devotional just transitions so beautifully. It starts showing how this trust plays out in these real-world, often desperate global contexts.
Right. We're moving from the premise and the definition to the application. How have communities actually lived this out under extreme pressure? And we start with observations from Africa.
And in the communities they describe, the focus is on this idea of collective care. When resources are scarce, the whole community becomes the carrier.
Precisely. The observation is that in many rural African communities, children aren't just raised by their parents. They're raised by the whole village, the whole extended family. When parents struggle, elders or others they step in seamlessly. This embodies that principle of absorbing weight.
And the source points to the role of faith when material things fail. And it uses this really powerful testimony.
Yes. The testimony is all about faith filling that gap. There's this one quote that really stood out to me. Even when we had little, we trusted that God would carry our children. And this isn't passive, It's an active trust that enables them to act together. Hope starts early, and it's maintained through this collective, trusting action.
That's such a strong communal example. Okay, now let's move to the Caribbean context. Here, the dynamic shifts a little. It's less about collective survival and more about generational endurance.
Exactly. Faith becomes this central heirloom. You have grandparents who've lived through so much hardship, instability, and they embody that principle of never letting go. They pray, they teach, and the kids, they learn hope not from sermons necessarily, but by watching their elders endure with this unwavering expectation.
Yeah, that sense of just knowing it. It's captured so well in the quote they use from that region. I didn't understand everything, but I knew God was with us. It's this deep, intuitive knowledge that comes from just watching resilience in action.
It is. It's the lived experience of staying close, but translated across decades. The proximity of faith in their lives becomes the constant, even when everything else is pulling them apart.
Okay, this next transition is really powerful. We're moving from the kind of observational endurance to this proactive courage in regions shaped by relentless conflict, specifically the Middle East, where children are born into this profound uncertainty and yet class. Families respond with this radical act of hope.
It's deeply courageous. The source calls it carried faith. It describes this practice of families, often in temporary situations or under incredible stress, praying blessings over their newborns. They are making sure that hope is spoken before fear can take root.
How does that specific act speaking, hope before fear, how does that work as a form of carrying?
It's almost a kind of psychological preemption. They're establishing the child's inherent worth and secure status theologically before the harsh realities of their environment can take hold and define that child as a victim. This proactive declaration of value is, for them, the ultimate act of taking responsibility for that child's inner world.
An incredible strategy, focusing not on minimizing the threat outside, but on maximizing the spiritual grind inside.
And that leads us perfectly to the final area of application, which is this inward shift. Looking at how adults, especially in places like Europe and the Americas, revisit those early wounds of feeling unseen or unloved, even if they grew up with, material comfort.
Right. This is the modern psychological application of the whole concept. It recognizes that even without scarcity on the outside, you can have these internal wounds, abandonment, neglect, that create the exact same feeling of being uncarried. And the source talks about the combined role of therapy, community, and faith in this really deep healing process.
The testimony from this section just confirms that internal shift. Someone says, when I realized God had been with me all along, even in the loneliness, something broke free. Just recognizing that perpetual care, the care that was there before your memory, provides this safe context to reevaluate and start to heal what was broken. It changes the story from I was abandoned to I was always held, I just didn't know it.
And the source doesn't just leave it there at realization. It provides a mechanism, a tool for actually internalizing this message. They call it the devotional pause technique.
And this psychological invitation is incredibly deliberate. The source encourages you, the listener, to physically pause and to spend time just imagining yourself as a child, vulnerable, dependent, and being held gently.
Why is visualizing yourself as a child so important in that process?
Because it bypasses the adult ego. The hardened, intellectualized part of us. When you connect back to that image of pure dependency, it lets the core affirmation land without all the adult filters of cynicism or merit. The imagery is like a portal back to that original moment.
And then the affirmations that go with it are designed to reverse that old programming, that feeling that you have to earn love or carry it all alone.
Exactly. They are meant to be practiced until they become intuitive. I release the past, which means letting go of that old story of abandonment. I receive care, which is permission to stop carrying the whole burden. And finally, I accept that I have always been loved. It's about intentionally applying that core truth you have been carried since the beginning to the pain you feel right now.
This has been such a holistic exploration. Let's try to synthesize this. What are the 5 key knowledge nuggets that this source material really wants to solidify for the listener?
Yes, these 5 points really are the ultimate takeaway. They tie all the threads together.
The first, which anchored the whole discussion, is this revolutionary idea that God's care began before your memory.
Second, the logical next step. Your life has always had value, independent of achievement, status, anything.
Third, and this is the direct message for anyone who feels isolated, the assurance that you were never abandoned.
Fourth, the path forward is laid out. Healing begins when we actively trust God with our story, all of it.
And finally, a declaration of just, ultimate, resilient hope. Hope is rooted deeper than pain. It is foundational.
And in its conclusion, the source pulls all of his personal work outward. It closes with a focus on compassionate action. It asks for healing for the wounded, restoration of worth for those who've lost it, protection for children in uncertain times, all over the world. The personal deep dive has to lead to a global perspective on care.
This has been a truly comprehensive deep dive. We started with this ancient biblical declaration. We spent real time defining what carrying actually entails, taking responsibility, absorbing weight.
Staying close.
And then we saw it manifest across all these diverse global communities. People struggling with scarcity, conflict, generational trauma, you name it.
It's a complete framework. Premise to definition to lived global application.
So for you, the listener, if you're someone who is constantly strong, because you have to be, or if you're just completely overwhelmed right now,
Sure.
the takeaway here is the permission, the radical permission to stop carrying that foundational weight alone. The assurance that your value predates your effort. And because of that, your effort doesn't need to sustain your worth. The burden of total self-reliance, it's not yours.
A powerful message for a world that just constantly demands more.
And let's leave you with a final thought to explore. The source notes that this idea of being carried isn't just about the beginning. It continues through every stage of life. So if that immense value, that foundational care we've been talking about, was established before your memory, before you had to do anything, what responsibilities does that inherent given value imply for our actions now, both toward ourselves and toward others who are still struggling under a heavy weight?
If we are inherently worthy of care, how does that shape the way we offer care? A truly great question to reflect on.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this exploration provided the quick, thorough, and engaging knowledge you were looking for. We'll see you next time.